Welcome. You're watching Arirang News, coming to you live from Seoul. I'm Kwon Jang-ho, and it's good to have you with us. Despite seemingly slow progress on talks with North Korea, U.S. President Donald Trump has reiterated that the next summit with Kim Jong-un is still on course for early next year. I'll be discussing that with our expert guest later in the show. But first, President Jaein has also said that the door remains open for Kim to visit Seoul before the end of the year. For more on that and our other headlines of the day, we turn to Devin Whiting at the News Centre. Devin?
Hi, Jung-ho. In fact, President Moon told reporters en route to New Zealand that President Trump is willing to give Kim Jong-un everything he wants if his regime denuclearizes. Presidents Moon and Trump met over the weekend on the sidelines of the G20 summit in Argentina. Our presidential correspondent Shin Se-min reports.
A message from Trump to Kim. President Moon Jae-in says he's carrying a message from U.S. President Donald Trump to Kim Jong-un should the North Korean leader make a reciprocal visit to Seoul by the end of the year.
또 트럼프 대통령은 김정은 위원장이 연내 서울 답방할 경우에 김정은 위원장에게 그 메시지를 전해달라는 그런 당부를 저한테 하기도 했습니다. 그런 만큼 김정은 위원장과 함께 남은 이 합의를 다 마저 이행하기를 바라고 또 김정은 위원장이 바라는 바를 자기가 이루어주겠다 뭐 이런 메시지를 전해달라는 당부를 하기도 했습니다.
President Moon explained that Trump's remarks don't necessarily mean concessions or sanctions relief. Instead, he said it could be things like the scaling down of South Korea-U.S. joint military drills or non-political exchanges like sports and cultural events. The South Korean leader added that through his pull aside with President Trump in Argentina, he felt a certain burden lifted of his shoulders.
어제 트럼프 대통령과의 그 회동을 통해서 한 가지 우려를 든 것은 혹시 북미 간의 뭐 2차 정상회담이라든지 또는 고위급 회담이 이루어지기 전에 남북 간에 먼저 또 이렇게 답방이 이루어지면 혹시라도 그런 것이 뭐 부담으로 작용하지 않을까 뭐 이런 염려가 없지 않았는데 어제 트럼프 대통령과 회동을 통해서 그런 이제 우려는 막힘이 사라졌다라는 말씀을 드릴 수 있겠습니다.
President Moon said whether or not Kim Jong-un comes to Seoul completely depends on him, and they'll have to wait and see what happens. But if it goes ahead, the South Korean leader said it would be a truly historic moment.
김정은 위원장의 서울 답방이 이루어진다면 그 자체로서 이 세계에 이렇게 보내는 평화적인 어떤 메시지, 그다음에 또 비핵화에 대한 의지, 또 남북 관계 발전에 대한 의지 모든 것을 다 담고 있는 것이라고 봅니다.
With President Moon back in the seat as the lead mediator, the question now is how that message from President Trump would provide momentum for the stalled denuclearization process and how North Korea would react to that. And we should know the answers in the coming weeks as North Korea's Kim Jong-un's international appearance doesn't look far away. Shin Se-min, Arirang News, Auckland.
President Moon is emphasizing that there is no divide between South Korea and the U.S. when it comes to dealing with North Korea. There's been speculation that the allies have differences about how to go forward. Hwang Ho-jun has this report.
President Moon Jae-in is insisting relations between Seoul and Washington are airtight when it comes to North Korea. Asked about how he views concerns the two allies' respective North Korea policies are out of lockstep, President Moon dismissed the question, saying there's no basis to the speculation.
트럼프 대통령과 여러 차례 만나고 또 이렇게 통화하고 하면서 이제는 상당한 신뢰, 그다음에 우위가 구축되었다. 그런 생각을 가지고 있거든요. 이렇게 한미 간에 무력함이 있다든지 뭐 이런 부분에 대해서 도대체 어떤 근거로 그런 식의 이야기를 하는지 모르겠어요.
He then confirmed once and for all that there's absolutely no daylight between the two allies in pursuing a nuclear-free Korean peninsula. Such confidence, the president says, is based on the change that has happened over the past year, saying there has not been a single nuclear or missile launch so far. President Moon Jae-in added that in order to carry out the promises of the Singapore summit between leaders Kim Jong-un and Donald Trump, there needs to be a timetable worked out between the two.
그 부분에 대해서 싱가포르 회담에서는 원칙적인 합의만 이룬 것이기 때문에 제2차 북미 정상회담에서 그 부분에 대해서 조금 더 큰 타임테이블에 대한 논의까지 들어가는 것이 바람직하다. 2차 북미 정상회담만 해도 내년 초 그러면 얼마 남지 않은 것이거든요. 저는 이 과정이 이렇게 잘 이루어지리라고 그렇게 낙관적으로 보고 있습니다.
The promise made in June includes 4 pillars: the regime's denuclearization, returning the remains of American war dead, the normalization of relations between the North and the U.S., and finally, securing the regime's safety. While President Moon sees the next Kim-Trump summit as an important opportunity to speed things up, he said he's not at all concerned about the slow progress made over the past month or two. Instead, he expresses optimism the process will turn out just fine. Hwang Ho-jun, Arirang News.
In other news, questions linger about when South Korea's National Assembly will finally be able to vote on the government's budget for next year, after rival parties missed the legal deadline of December 2nd. They still haven't finished amending the bill, so it was referred to a plenary session in its original form on December 1st, as stipulated by law. The floor leaders of the 3 main parties met Monday morning hoping to set a new date, but they were unable to reach an agreement. They're expected to meet again this afternoon. The National Assembly Speaker says he may use his authority to convene a plenary session later in the evening and introduce the budget bill in its original form while lawmakers continue to work on a new version. But it's unclear when they'll have that ready, since there are still areas of contention, including spending for job creation and inter-Korean projects. The U.S. and China agreed at the G20 not to add more tariffs on each other for the time being. Analysts at the Korea International Trade Association say the reason might be that both countries are facing an economic slowdown. Our Go Ryun-hee explains.
Korea International Trade Association announced on Sunday their analysis on why the two world's 2 biggest economies have agreed on a temporary ceasefire in their trade war. The association says the 90-day truce was necessary because of the two countries' economic situation. For one, China's GDP growth slowed to 6.5% on-year in the third quarter, down 0.2 percentage points from the second quarter, and marking the weakest on-year quarterly increase since 2009 during the global financial crisis. Kita added that consumption and investment in China is also slowing down. This comes after the U.S. imposed 25% tariffs on $50 billion worth of Chinese technology goods, including machinery, semiconductors, and autos in July and August. The economic situation is similarly grim for the United States. Major news outlets reported that plunging sales in automobiles and houses were signaling an economic slowdown. For instance, the Washington Post reported last month that General Motors layoffs and plant shutdowns suggest that the U.S. economy may be starting to slow down. Kita says the overall situation might have forced President Trump's hands to negotiate with Xi. A manager at Kita points out another important issue in Saturday's agreement: an existing timeline.
The most important part of Saturday's agreement is the 90-day timeline on the bilateral negotiations. This means that the United States won't wait forever until the two sides reach an agreement.
Meanwhile, although Korean companies earn more time to prepare for the trade war, Kita says the government and companies should prepare for additional tariffs possible next year. Go Ryun-hee, Arirang News.
I'm Devin Whiting, and those are your news headlines.
U.S. President Donald Trump has confirmed that he's still ready to hold a second summit with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un in the next few months. Does this suggest a possible progress on denuclearization talks? We'll look at that question further, but first, our Park Hee-jun reports on Trump's latest remarks.
U.S. President Donald Trump has reaffirmed that his second summit with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un will probably take place early next year. Speaking to reporters on his return trip from the G20 summit in Argentina, Trump said he expects the meeting to happen in January or February. He also said 3 locations are being considered for the summit, adding it will be held, quote, within plane distance. Although he did not elaborate on whose plane he was referring to, it raises speculation the next Kim-Trump summit will again take place in Asia. Asked whether Kim would visit the U.S., President Trump only said he will at some point. Kim Jong-un's private jet is only capable of flying to Asian countries that are not so far from the north. The remarks bring countries such as Vietnam, Mongolia, or Indonesia under the spotlight, as all three have North Korean embassies. President Trump's comments are seen as a positive sign amid a stall in the denuclearization talks between Pyongyang and Washington. Watchers say it reflects the Trump administration's unwavering commitment to maintaining dialogue with the North. The South Korean government has also taken the wheel in finding a way to restart the two sides' negotiations as seen through the Moon-Trump summit last week. Where working-level negotiations failed, top-down negotiations are now adding momentum to North Korea diplomacy. Now, it's up to the North Korean leader to make a decision. There's only a short period of time until the proposed date for the next North Korea-U.S. summit, and experts say only Kim Jong-un's will can make it happen. Park Ki-jun, Arirang News.
Now, to provide further insights on these latest developments, we have with us Dr. Pong Young-sik from the Yonsei Institute for North Korean Studies. It's good to have you back on the show.
Pleased to be here again.
So Trump has reiterated that he's still planning ahead for a summit with Kim Jong-un for January and February. As the report says, some watchers are saying this is a positive sign. Do you still see it that way as well?
It's a positive sign, but we have to take his comment as it is. He confirmed that he is willing to meet Chairman Kim Jong-un for the second time in principle as soon as possible, probably early next year in January, February. So the situation is quite fluid. It is only confirmation of the second summit meeting to take place only in principle, but the details are still up in the air.
Do you think this perhaps points to any progress on the denuclearization talks that seem to have stalled recently?
Well, the denuclearization talks and the second U.S. DPRK summit meeting are the two sides of the same coin. It is not so meaningful for both leaders to have another summit meeting if at the working levels both sides will have failed to make any progress on exchanging denuclearization of North Korea and lifting of at least part of economic sanctions. And both countries agreed to move on for eventual end of hostilities since the Korean War and diplomatic normalization. So it is up to the will of the leaders. At the same time, the progress, any kind of progress that might be made at the working levels of negotiations.
President Moon, who also met with Trump at the G20 summit in Argentina, when he met Trump, he revealed to press afterwards that Trump told him that he's ready to meet with, he's ready to give Kim Jong-un everything that he desires, but once Kim carries out what was agreed at the summit in Singapore as well. I mean, what do you think he meant by that, everything that he desires?
There's nothing new. I mean, it's a reiteration of his North Korea policy, dubbed as maximum pressure, maximum engagement. So as long as North Korea is not going to make any concrete steps toward verifiable or final and fully verified denuclearization, then maximum pressure will continue, including economic sanctions in place. But if North Korea is going to make right decisions, then there is a huge package of benefits. That is the core of his message, dubbed as a maximum engagement. So maximum engagement part has been reiterated and confirmed by his most recent remark. So it is up to North Korea, according to President Trump's statement, to make strategic decision in the right course of action.
At the same time, President Moon has also said that the possibility of Kim Jong-un visiting Seoul within this year is still open, and then that there is only a month left. I mean, do you think it is possible? I mean, why do you think Moon is saying these comments?
President Moon Jae-in himself described the possibility as, well, possibility, right? Yeah, he just left it open that way. I think the chance for Chairman Kim Jong-un to make an official visit to Seoul before the end of this year is not as likely as Santa Claus is coming to town before the end of this year. Because there's not much to gain for Kim Jong-un to come to Seoul without any assurance made by both South Korea and the United States that if Kim Jong-un coming to Seoul for return visit, summit meeting with South Korean president, then the lifting at least part of economic sanctions that have been strangling the national economy in North Korea will be lifted. But very disappointing to North Korean leadership, I think. The agreement forged by President Moon Jae-in and President Donald Trump in the sideline of their meeting, of the G20 meeting in Argentina, is that until North Korea is going to make concrete actions of denuclearization, all economic sanctions, maximum pressure will remain in place. So without the prospect of economic sanctions to be lifted after his visit to Seoul, then Kim Jong-un does not see the necessity to use one of his biggest and most effective strategic card towards South Korea and the United States. So I don't think there's enough incentives for Mr. Kim Jong-un to use this strategic card of coming to South Korea. But if he comes to South Korea and there will be a fourth summit meeting in a year between the two leaders of Koreas, then I believe that it is going to be like very ceremonial and symbolic.
Well, you don't seem very hopeful for this to actually be happening. But then why do you think President Moon made these remarks? I mean, they are quite odd in a way that he's come and said, the door is still open, we'll see, it's going to happen. Do you think he might have met Trump in Argentina and they had some sort of discussion about this where Trump maybe perhaps gave his blessing? Is there any kind of suggestion that something like that happened?
Well, I mean, if you want to describe it as a blessing by U.S. President Donald Trump, then it is blessing. But I'd like to describe it as understanding that United States is not going to oppose both Koreas have another summit meeting, this time within the territory of South Korea, which is the ally of the United States. But there is no returned favor by the United States in the form of diluting the existing economic sanctions. So having another inter-Korean summit meeting in South Korea is one thing, and lifting economic sanctions in exchange for the summit meeting agreed by the North Korean leadership is another. So again, this is very disheartening and disappointing to North Korean leadership because there is not much to gain for Mr. Kim Jong-un to come to Seoul if there is no trophy that will be given, rewarded to North Korea.
So, as you said, the President Trump has put the ball back in the North Korea's court. President Moon seems to have done the same thing. He said also Kim's visit will depend on what Kim Jong-un does, how he responds. So South Korea and the U.S. have put the ball back in North Korea's court, but North Koreans are saying without weakening international sanctions, it's not enough. So where do we go next?
Well, it is up to North Korean leadership to decide what kind of concessions that North Korea is ready to make in order to make the summit meeting with Mr. Donald Trump to happen again as early as possible, and doing something that will help to persuade the Trump administration to agree with the South Korean government about lifting at least part of economic sanctions. And demand by the Trump administration toward the leadership in North Korea is very clear. You have to take verifiable actions related to denuclearization. So a dismantlement of the Punggye-ri and the Dongchang-ri nuclear test and missile test sites are not enough. But North Korea has been in refusal to take additional steps until the United States will make its own concessions for North Korea. So it explains why there has been long-standing stalemate between North Korea and the United States.
I mean, do you see any hope for these kind of meetings to happen in the next few months? I mean, especially as someone working in the news media, I'd like a bit of heads up to see, to prepare for these if we can. But what do you think is the possibilities of these happening?
You mean the Kim Jong-un's visit to Seoul?
Kim Jong-un's visit to Seoul and the U.S. North Korea summit as well.
Well, I do not completely rule out the possibility of Chairman Kim Jong-un to come to Seoul, because if he visits Seoul, then it will be a very effective strategy to drive wedge among South Korean public and drive wedge between South Korea and the United States as allies. But my question is whether there will be enough incentive for North Korean leadership to make this decision. Because last time, the North Korean leadership agreed with the summit meeting with South Korean government, which was first time was 2000 under the Kim Dae-jung administration. Then the North Korean leadership of Kim Jong-il waited until the last moment until the Kim Dae-jung government agreed to provide $500 million as an incentives, and which created a great deal of the political controversies and the unfortunate suicide of the chairman of the Hyundai Corporation, who got jailed for this violation of the security law. So without South Korean government being able to provide very tangible and concrete and substantial incentives and concessions to North Korean leadership, Kim Jong-un may not be so willing to sacrifice this trump card, one of its trump cards, towards South Korea prematurely.
Let's move on to seeing what's coming out of the noise coming out of North Korea as well. So a North Korean propaganda website has called for South Korea to stop all joint military drills with the U.S. completely. Now, this seems to be coming in response to the two allies saying that they will scale down their annual exercise, the Fall Eagle, and in the spring next year. And the U.S. Defense Secretary Jim Mattis said it's because, it's to help with diplomatic efforts with the North. But Pyongyang are saying scaling down efforts is not enough. They need to scrap it completely. I mean, do you think this, why do you think they're coming up with this kind of comments?
It's North Korea trying to play the eye for eye, ear for ear strategy toward the United States. It's like saying to Washington that if you want complete and verifiable, irreversible dismantlement of our long-range missile test sites and the nuclear test facilities, then you have to take similar actions with regard to your regular joint military exercises in such a large scale with South Korean military. So scaling down would not satisfy us, our expectation, as well as just like scale down our missile and nuclear activities will not satisfy your expectations. So it's a kind of a quid pro quo, eye for an eye strategy taken by North Korean military and the government.
And meanwhile, finally, Kim Jong-un had not been seen in a couple of weeks, but he made his first appearance on North Korean state media in about 13, 14 days. He was reported to have visited fisheries and shoe factories and among other sites. We don't know exactly when these visits took place because the North Korean state media doesn't necessarily specify. But what should we make of his disappearance and reappearance? Or is that something that we normally find with Kim Jong-un in North Korean media?
I believe that Mr. Kim Jong-un is under a tremendous amount of stress in the last month of 2018. Just like us, we have a lot of backlogged activities and tasks to fulfill to meet the deadlines before this year, 2018, will be over. So he must be really busy and stressed out to prepare for the content of the New Year's message in 2019 to the nation and the world. It'll be a very agonizing and difficult process for him to decide what to be included in the New Year's message that must be announced on the first day of 2019, which is less than a month away. So I believe that he must be really stressed out and busy, deciding on the content of the New Year's message.
Can you explain a little bit more before we go about that New Year's message? Because, can you explain the significance of it for some of our viewers who might not be aware? North Korea always their leader has this New Year's Day speech. What more can you tell us about that?
Well, it is not only the message to the nation to clarify the strategic decision of the nation, at least for the new year, but it is also explaining to the world that North Korea needs and wishes to be welcome as one of the normal states in the world, and reiterating its demand and desire to be accepted as a nuclear weapon power state. But it is one thing to expressing the desires of the North Korea, but it is another for North Korean leadership to effectively strategize how the rest of the world would be more accommodating to the demands by North Korea. So words matters, and the words matters when it is spoken by supreme leader of any country, and North Korea is no exception to the rule.
So that'll be January 1st and to 2019. And we hope to have you back on the show to have your analysis on his speech when that happens as well.
Definitely.
And that's all for now. I'll be back same time tomorrow, but stay tuned to Arirang for our later newscast for the latest updates. Thank you for watching and hope you can join us again next time. Goodbye.